Uhuru, Uhuru comrades, Uhuru everyone. I want to welcome you to today's very special live from the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Defense Campaign. We are here today to discuss a very important topic and a reality. When we say you can't kill the revolution, we're excited for today to have everybody here today for our webinar. So my name is Mwezi Odom, and I'm a member of the African People's Socialist Party, and I lead as the chair of the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign. And I'm joined here today with some very special guests. We have a very exciting program for everyone here today. The purpose of these webinars are to expose all the ways that the colonial state has historically and continues to attack the African and colonized peoples who are struggling for liberation. We recognize that this is an anti-colonial attack, and so we have launched an anti-colonial defense led by the African People's Socialist Party. And we want to just open up today to really let everybody know that the purpose of these campaigns are here to continue to provide political education so that we understand what we are up against. So today we will see and we will learn about the counterinsurgency attack, the history of the FBI attacks, and the history of counterinsurgency as a state tool to continue to oppress and crush liberation struggles. But as we say, you can't kill the revolution. And today we want to welcome you. We're going to tell you how to donate, how you can support the Hands Off campaign. But first, we're going to move into a presentation and give you just a quick overview of the Hands Off campaign. Uhuru, thank you, comrade. So first, I just want to, again, appreciate everyone. And as I said, this event, in addition to all of our events, are surrounded by a profound sense of urgency, because in many ways, what has happened in terms of this open attack on the African People's Socialist Party is unprecedented, and we are not going to take this lightly. So let's take a look at what happened on July 29th. Uhuru.
You have a federal warrant for this address. Keep your hands up and follow orders. This is the FBI. We have a warrant for...
They handcuffed me and my wife out here. They wanted me to sit on the curb while they were carrying this out, something that I refused to do. They wanted my wife to sit on the curb out here, that she refused to do.
As I was coming out, this big old drone met me.
The only revolutionary organization that's done something here on the ground practically for African people is the one that's come under attack. Institution that offers a community radio station, a newspaper, a commercial kitchen, an Aquaba Hall rental space, and community office for our organizers. That was the building that has come under attack.
You need a breach? What do you need?
Need one.
I don't know.
Oh, it's all better than money.
Don't
take it.
We will build a movement of white people that says hands off the Uhuru movement.
They see in the African People's Socialist Party a vanguard for the struggle for the liberation of our people. They see that because not just what we do here in the United States, but because we had the temerity to do like Garvey, to do like Malcolm X, and take the struggle of black people around the world.
Uhuru.
This is the
Thank you. Next
FBI.
slide.
You have a federal warrant for
So
this.
as you saw, what happened on July 29th was this attack on the African People's Socialist Party. And we want to express that, again, as you saw in the video, right, the FBI used battering rams. They, barreled down the doors in the apartment homes, in the Uhuru, in the apartment, above the Uhuru Solidarity Center on the other side of town in the white community as well. And in St. Petersburg, Florida, as you saw there, the police, well, as you did not see there, was that the police drew Director Akile, who is a leading member in the African People's Socialist Party, who leads all the agitprop work, calling her, telling her that her car was being broken into. And at this point, when she exited her home, they made their presence known. They surrounded her, checked her car, and stole items as well from her in St. Petersburg, Florida, where they also raided the Uhuru house and also the home of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Deputy Chair's home in St. Petersburg, Florida. So we understand that the party was attacked because it has always fought for the liberation of Africa and African people everywhere. And this is a global anti-colonial organization. This also happens at a time when the party and the Black Power Blueprint, located in St. Louis, in North St. Louis, Missouri, are at new heights of success after 50 years of relentless leadership for fighting for African liberation. So it's fair to say that it was not only an attempt to, an assassination attempt against the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, but this was also an attempt to crush the anti-colonial work and relentless struggle of the party. So as you see here, the FBI named and they made false allegations, right? Includes, saying, which you didn't see in the video, that the chairman and the party were under quote unquote Russian malign influence, right, in running electoral campaigns and pushing the agenda for genocide against African people and for reparations. So this is an attack, again, as we know, on the people, and this is the continuation of COINTELPRO. And as you can see here, they have named in this indictment 4 members of the Uhuru movement as quote unquote unindicted co-conspirators in these bogus allegations. And you'll hear more from our unindicted 4 quote unquote in the future. Next slide. So as we know, comrades and friends and supporters, we are here because this was an assault on the right for African people to organize and advocate for the total liberation of Africa and African people. And as the chairman says, we are not retreating, we are building. Uhuru. So you will all learn today about the principles of unity of the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off campaign. You can find this information here on our website. You can also find it in the foldover, where you can get a hard copy of some of the information about the campaign. You can also find that on our website. But to understand that our principles of unity, ask people to unite with and to denounce and to make demands, for the FBI to, and the U.S. government to, again, end the U.S. Surveillance and infiltration of the Uhuru movement and release of all documents on the movement since the 1960s, as well as the history of attacks on the liberation struggle, which is the reason that we are here today. So today, I will let you know how what you can do. And we will let you know how you can support this campaign, like sign the petition, make a contribution. You can go to, you can join the committee, host events. You'll learn more about that. But one thing that we want everyone to do before I turn it over, next slide, is to go to handsoffuhuru.org. And you can do this right now while you hear me talking, handsoffuhuru.org. We have chat moderators who can put this in the chat. Go there right now and sign and join up for the rapid response. We want to be able to have everybody sign this emergency response pledge. This is so that you can be alerted by text message. So we need your phone number, right, for immediate emergency actions if the U.S. colonial state or the FBI makes any further moves against the Uhuru movement and this struggle. And so we want everybody to please go to handsoffuhuru.org. You'll see it right there on our homepage. Sign the pledge. And when you've signed the pledge, put it in the chat that you've signed the pledge so that we can see that this number is growing. We have a goal of getting 40 new additions to this list. So, and I know we can do that during our meeting today. So right now, everyone, I want to thank you. And as I said, later on the program, you will learn more about how you can support this dynamic campaign. But next, I'm going to turn it into next slide. And we could just turn it over into Director Akile, who will take us through the presentation highlighting the shift of the counterinsurgency and the FBI war on the, not the shift, but the struggle on the African liberation struggle. So Uhuru Director Akile.
Uhuru Comrade Chair Mwezi, thank you so much for the introduction and just that overview into the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign. We are going to be getting into the history of the FBI attacks against African people and the overall anti-colonial struggle. And that will provide additional context for what we understand about the raids that occurred on July 29th with the FBI attacking the Uhuru movement. And I also just want to make mention that this event is happening a day before the anniversary of the assassination of Fred Hampton, which was December 4th in Chicago, 1969. And this is, important because that's a part of the whole history of counterinsurgency that we're talking about. And this is, where the theme, you can't kill the revolution. You can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution, which is what they set out to do with the crushing of our movement, certainly during the Black Power movement of the 1960s. And so I just wanted to, raise that point as well, and also say, long live Comrade Fred Hampton. So let's go ahead and get into this overview. So first, we want to acknowledge and salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who for over 50 years has been engaged in relentless struggle to forward, the aims and interests of the worldwide African revolution, and was a part of and witnessed the counterinsurgency of the 1960s, the war without terms made against our people, the assassinations, the jailings, the beatings. I mean, these are things that Chairman himself experienced, but did not surrender to, and instead, led the charge forward to build the African Revolution following its defeat in the formation of the African People's Socialist Party and the development of the theory of African internationalism to solve the problems of the African Revolution. And so if we have a question as to why the chairman was targeted by the FBI in 2022, we can look at this incredible history of his leadership that has made a permanent imprint on the world and has painted the way forward for African people and really the entire world in terms of our future outside of this social system that we know as colonial capitalism. So want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru. I also want to salute Deputy Chair Onozine Yeshitela, who was in the video we just saw, who was a part of being attacked by the FBI. And she is the leader of all of the economic work within the African People's Socialist Party, setting the foundation for that liberated African economy, which is the vision of Marcus Garvey, who was attacked by the FBI in the early 1900s or in 1920s. And so Comrade Deputy Chair, under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, carries out this strategy today of self-determination for African people. And so, this is a part of what comes under attack. Deputy Chair was under attack. These economic institutions have come under attack. Again, just want to salute Deputy Chair and her fearless struggle to, pave the way forward for an independent African economy. Uhuru. So again, counterinsurgency, the context for the July 29th, 2022 raids on the chairman and the party. So counterinsurgency is the colonial state attack on anti-colonial struggles for national liberation, power, and self-government. And colonialism is the violent occupation of a whole people by a foreign and alien state power for profit. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela has been critical in helping us understand this question of colonialism and that African people are colonized subjects. We've been snatched from Africa, dispersed throughout the world, and living under colonial domination. And our Africa and our people have been subjugated and exploited for centuries for the extraction, for the theft of our resources. And the chairman quotes, we quote the chairman here, colonialism is a vicious beast whose existence makes our party, the African People's Socialist Party, necessary. And in terms of the chairman advancing key understandings, he has introduced this whole question of the colonial mode of production. And this is a development of the theory of African internationalism. And the colonial mode of production teaches us that everything produced for the colonizer comes at the expense of the colonized. Access to wealth, the experience of democracy, even the ideas in the heads of the colonizers. This is all a product of the colonial mode of production. Chairman says capitalism was born from the assault on Africa and requires colonialism as a pedestal, and that there wouldn't be a Europe, a quote unquote white people, or America without colonialism. And this is different from what we've heard historically about how capitalism came into existence. And we hear all of this, we hear more and more today, people are opposed to capitalism, are in favor of socialism, but they don't take a stance against colonialism. And the chairman has helped us understand that there wouldn't be a capitalism without the first initial colonial assault on Africa and African people, the theft of indigenous land here, where we're, having this discussion today, that those things were the requirement for this whole global economic system that came into being that we know as capitalism today. So these are fundamental understandings that the chairman has forwarded for more than 50 years. And the colonizer lives at the expense of the colonized. That much is clear. Insurgency is when a colonized people rise up in resistance to fight for their liberation. So we've talked about what counterinsurgency is, which is the opposite of this. It's to, quell the resistance that's being made by colonized people everywhere. The counterinsurgency comes in to crush that, and insurgency is when colonized people rise up to fight for their liberation. Counterinsurgency, I'll say it again, is when the colonial state attempts to destroy the resistance of the colonized, such as the British torture and murder of the Mau Mau and African resistance in Kenya fighting for independence. Counterinsurgency is a combination of conventional military operations and other means, including assassinations and political imprisonment, as well as slander, belittling, and discrediting the people and the revolutionaries. Counterinsurgency is a war without terms. The colonizer can do anything it wants to the colonized. There is no Geneva Convention on the treatment of prisoners of war or preventing torture. So none of the same requirements that they established for, wars between themselves, wars between the colonial powers, none of those same arrangements apply when it comes to colonized people. It's wide open, in terms of what it is that they can do to colonize people with impunity. There is no, there's no trial for any of these things. There's no, in terms of the special treatment of the colonized when we are attacked, come under assault. Like I said, it's just totally wide open. There are no limits to what can happen to the colonized in order to prevent the insurgency of the colonized. So the Black Revolution of the 1960s forced the US Congress to hold the Church Committee hearings of 1975. This showed that the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, National Security Agency, NSA, Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and Internal Revenue Service, IRS, worked together as agents of the colonial state, waging counterinsurgency inside the US as well as around the world. Besides COINTELPRO, this is one of the most popular ones, other US programs of counterinsurgency included the Phoenix program, which killed over 26,000 revolutionaries in Vietnam through murder, torture, terrorism, also known as the war within the war. This is the colonial state in action. The CIA counterinsurgency programs known as Family Jewels and MK Ultra carried out assassinations and overthrow of African leaders such as Patrice Lumumba in Congo, Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, Robert Sobukwe in South Africa, repeated unsuccessful assassination attempts against Fidel Castro. This is the colonial state in action. Genocide is a tactic of counterinsurgency. For example, enslaved Africans kidnapped to the US, indigenous people and theft of their land. In Kenya, the British against the Mau Mau, the British in South Africa, Zimbabwe, Sudan, the Belgians in Congo, the Germans in Namibia, the French in Algeria, the US in the Philippines, the British in India, CIA genocide in Indonesia. Using the police as military forces is a tactic of counterinsurgency. The Omnibus Crime Control Bill in 1968 began federal funding of local police departments, training them as counterinsurgency forces, including the SWAT teams. Clinton and Biden's crime bill of 1994 put 100,000 new police on the streets and increased the mass imprisonment of African people inside the US. The FBI was formed by the colonial state in 1908. In its early years, the FBI was used as counterinsurgency forces against the Mexican Revolution and the Bolshevik Revolution. In 1919, the FBI was used against Marcus Garvey, who led a movement of 11 million African people around the world under the slogan, Africa for Africans, at home and abroad. James Wormley Jones was hired as the first Black FBI agent hired to attack Garvey, using the colonized to wage war on the African liberation movement in the US. Garvey was set up for bogus charges of mail fraud in 1923, and he was sent to prison, then deported. In the early 20th century, Ida B. Wells was targeted by the FBI for her fight to end lynching and white mob violence. She was never intimidated by the FBI. Paul Robeson, an African actor, singer, lawyer, and activist, was charged by the FBI with being a Russian agent. His passport was taken away, and through the CIA's MK Ultra program, he was drugged while in USSR, which led to his death. W.E.B. Du Bois was targeted by the FBI as a Russian agent when he was in his 80s. His passport was confiscated while he was in Africa, and he died in Ghana. In 1966, the COINTELPRO goals, which was led by FBI agent William Sullivan, those goals included to prevent the coalition of militant Black nationalist groups, prevent the rise of a Black messiah who could unify and electrify the militant Black nationalist movement, prevent violence by neutralizing Black leaders and organizations, discredit Black leaders and organizations, prevent respectability, prevent the long-term growth of the Black movement, especially among the youth. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Fred Hampton were all assassinated by the US colonial state. Chairman Omali Yeshitela wrote that the Black Panther Party was the main target and bore the brunt of the colonial counterinsurgency, the primary factor of the Panthers' demise. 1971, George and Jonathan Jackson and the Soledad brothers imprisoned and murdered by the colonial state. 1973, Black Panther Party members Assata Shakur and Sundiata Acoli were targeted by COINTELPRO. Sundiata was only released after nearly 50 years in prison, and Assata escaped to exile. Colonial Attica Prison, powerful uprising in 1971. The state responded in brutal massacre of resisting African prisoners. Huey Newton spoke at the Uhuru House in 1987. He said, "You might not have the Black Panther Party, but you have the Uhuru House. You might not have the Black Panther newspaper, but you have the burning spear." So they haven't done anything by destroying one organization. And as we should all know, the colonial state assassinated Huey P. Newton, and they attempted to kill him a second time in the media by slandering him. And it was the African People's Socialist Party under the leadership of the chairman that resurrected, the life and the legacy of Huey P. Newton and changed the narrative, changed the headlines, on those articles that raised Huey P. Newton back up to his revolutionary stature. Huey Newton was assassinated in 1989. Oh, I just said that, sorry. So the Uhuru movement led in organizing his wake, his funeral, and tribute, mobilizing the African masses and neutralizing the media slander. James Baldwin, Aretha Franklin, Sam Cooke, all targeted by the FBI for their support for the Black Revolution of the 1960s. Chairman Omali Yeshitela was the only one who summed up the attacks on our movement of the 60s as counterinsurgency by the colonial state then and now. Chairman says U.S. imposed drugs, the war on drugs, and mass imprisonment as part of U.S. counterinsurgency against the whole African population. This was the colonial state in action. Chairman Omali Yeshitela faced constant threats on his life and repeated political imprisonment during the 1960s and 70s. In 1978, shots were fired through the door of an auditorium where the chairman was speaking in San Francisco, sponsored by a white left group. In the 1980s, the chairman's family's van was set on fire in an assassination attempt by the colonial state. In November of 1996, the colonial state sent 300 police from around Florida to assault on the Uhuru House following a community uprising sparked by the police murder of 18-year-old Tyron Lewis. The state tried to kill the chairman and all those in the Uhuru House by firing all the tear gas in the city into the building. The African community fought the police and shot down a helicopter, pushing back the cops. So as we can see, there's a whole history of colonial state attacks against the Uhuru movement specifically. Counterinsurgency did not end in the 60s. It didn't end in the early 1900s, and it hasn't ended, as we saw with the July 29th attack on the chairman and the party. So the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign builds mass support, serving as a counteroffensive for the party and all anti-colonial forces facing state attacks. We are changing the political narrative by exposing the colonial reality. So that's why we're having this event. That's why we're laying out this history to show that it is a continuum of trying to destroy the ability, the will of African and other colonized people to fight for their freedom and independence, to throw off this system of the colonial mode of production so that no longer are our lives, our labor, and our resources being used to generate life and wealth and prosperity for the colonizer. We are the ones who have the audacity to fight for a world where nobody has to live at the expense of anybody else. And that is why we have come under attack on July 29th. But as this event title says, you can't kill the revolution, you can't jail the revolution, we are winning. So Uhuru comrades, thank you so much. And turning it back over now to our campaign chair, Comrade Mwezi. Uhuru.
Uhuru Director Kile, thank you so much for that powerful presentation and, political education on this really important topic. And, it's important that we take this fight back, right? With all these understandings, this is our history. If you are oppressed and colonized, this is your history. And, we can see that the state is and was still in action. And we have to be able to control this narrative that the U.S. propaganda machine and, ideas, right? This war of ideas, which is a form of the state, how this continues to, to wage war on the people. So I just want to really appreciate that. And I encourage all of our listeners to come back to this video later and, weaponize ourselves with these understandings so that we can wage this fight back in the war of ideas as well. So hands off, and I want to appreciate that. So now we are moving on to what is really a very important section of our program, and not just this program in essence, but of the campaign and of this liberation struggle. Solidarity, the question of, us, understanding that this is that we all should have an interest in overturning this system that wages war on the people who are fighting for their liberation is important. So I want to welcome two very important and dear comrades. We will hear statements from Comrade Benjamin Prado, who is the Undersecretary for Unión del Barrio. He will give a statement, and he will also be followed by Reverend Dr. Julianne Robertson from the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition, and representing behind her, as well as Unión, very many wonderful comrades. So I want to turn it over to Comrade Benjamin, who will lead a solidarity. Uhuru, comrade.
Uhuru, comrades, to the African People's Socialist Party, to Comrade Omali Yeshitela, Unión del Barrio is, very proud and very honored to be part of this important discussion and panel, here today on the 53rd, on the eve of the 53rd anniversary of the horrendous terrorist attack and assassination of Chair Fred Hampton in 1969. And, it's really important because his words, right? You may be able to kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill a revolution. The concept and idea that it's not about the individual, but it's about the people's struggle, the history accumulated, and the tremendous work that the party has laid out in not only capturing what has been, the history of African people struggling for liberation and consolidating it into what today is the African People's Socialist Party, and laying out, a vision, a historical context to wage that struggle within the political borders of this empire and beyond, right, is really important for our struggle as well as the Mexican liberation movement, as indigenous peoples, because understanding history provides us with the tools, with the context, and even the lessons learned, right, from the attacks. And I want to really appreciate this presentation that Comrade Akile laid out, because providing that historical context exposes the real nature of this vicious, hostile entity known as the United States government and U.S. imperialism, right? What is the intention of U.S. imperialism but to create conditions that are hostile to humanity, really, the world over, as was expressed through the countless assassination attempts, through the countless assassinations, number one, of many revolutionary figures and movements in history, including, our very own Ricardo Flores Magon, who was incarcerated, who was the ideologue of the Mexican Revolution, who was captured here in Southern California, who was taken to a prison and died in essence in captivity. But his ideas, the struggle of ideas, the struggle of providing, ideological clarity as to what must be done in order to overturn this terrible relationship that we have with U.S. imperialism and settler colonialism, it is of profound importance, because despite, the attempts of U.S. imperialism to erase the historical context and struggles that our peoples have waged, it has been because of the work of the party, has been because of the work of organizations, even us as Unión del Barrio, to carry on that legacy of anti-colonial struggle. Because if we want to build an alternative reality for our peoples, then it must be based on historical and dialectical materialism, which provides us with the necessary tools to challenge this brutal sick system, right? And the significance also of what has been not only the state forces, but also its white nationalist auxiliary as a force that forms part of the of a counterinsurgency movement against colonized people here. And for Unión del Barrio, for many years, we have seen how we need to deploy, a strategy of dual and contending power. And that's one of the things that we have clearly identified, that the United States wants to eliminate that example, just like they attacked the Garvey movement as it developed its own economic development plans for the African people during the early 1900s. The example of the Black Power blueprint today is what's really coming under attack. They use the excuse because there may have been a Russian talking on your programs and shows. They use as an excuse, as an in, also utilizing the imperialist media, right, to attack and slander, not only the Uhuru movement, but anybody that thinks outside of the mainstream corporate propaganda machine, the corporate propaganda that daily feeds all these types of misinformation, disinformation, and even straight up lies about what is happening in Ukraine and Russia. But more importantly, the slander and lies that are being attempted to dissuade us from even joining the struggle, right? From even being part of a struggle. And the attacks on the FBI attacks being something that's not new, right? And it expresses itself in our communities in many different ways, not only the FBI, but all of its police forces, right? Including the new, more, I would even say the more sophisticated forms of surveillance that have been deployed by even immigration authorities, right? Identifying people using all kinds of technology to really intimidate people from even struggling for our basic constitutional rights, which, you know, can be undermined at any moment, right? So I think for us, it's really important to expose that, to expose the nature of this beast, and be able to unite more than anything, close ranks against these types of attacks, so that future generations can not only can continue to build this movement and once and for all, you know, close ranks against this very hostile entity that continues to attack social movements, political movements, and revolutionary movements that will improve our lives on our terms. And, you know, that's the importance and significance of this struggle, to keep hands off the Uhuru movement and hands off Africa. Thank you very much, comrades, for this important presentation and for inviting Unión El Barrio to participate. Uhuru.
Uhuru, comrade Benjamin, and as it has been said, the highest form of the highest expression of unity is through organization. So, and I want to just really appreciate you for that statement, Uhuru. All right, well, thank you, Unión. And I want to now also have us hear from our next statement, which will be from Reverend Dr. Julianne Roberts of the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition, whom we had the profound honor of marching with on the November 5th March on Washington back in November, representing with her many wonderful comrades. I want to welcome you, sister and Dr. Comrade Julianne. And I see you here. Maybe your video just needs to start. Okay.
I am waiting for the host to start my video, but I will say thank you so much for having me here. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Hands off. Uhuru, hands off Africa. So I am here in several different capacities. I'm a member of UNIA, I'm a member of NCOBRA, Empower DC, and I'm here on behalf of Dr. Marcia Coleman Adebayo from the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition. So I want to start off by talking about what is happening in Bethesda. There was once a thriving Black community there, complete with bowling alley, a restaurant, several homes, and businesses. And little by little, by force, the Ku Klux Klan came to beat people in the middle of the night. Often they would use the tactic of getting people inebriated and forcing them to sign over the deeds to their land. There were initiatives from the government raising taxes or failing to provide water or gas services and forcing people to leave that way and getting title to the land. But the most heinous atrocity by far is happening right now in Bethesda, Maryland on River Road. There are dump trucks, excavators, steamrollers, all kinds of heavy equipment digging up bones, coffins, tombstones, and other funerary objects. And it has been happening for a while. Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition, led by Dr. Adebayo, has been fighting for 7 years. There was a town meeting where one of the officials said that they were going to build a storage facility over an alleged cemetery. And one of the descendants, Mr. Harvey Matthews, came forward and said, that is not an alleged cemetery. That is an actual cemetery. And I know because I used to play there, because we couldn't play in the parks when I was little because it was segregated. And all of the officials went pale white because here was somebody who was speaking truth to power. But what they did, instead of adhering to morality and ethics and all the things we wish that people would generally do, they started to dig. And as they were digging, the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition members were taking pictures, developing a list of atrocities, events that were outside of the rule of law. But that didn't stop them. And that's characteristic of the kind of people that we see in the FBI, NSA, CIA. They really don't care. What they really want is money. And at the end of the day, and power. They want to use power and they use it ruthlessly and with no integrity at all. So they started to dig. And at this point, there is a 200 or 300 foot hole in the ground where the cemetery used to be. The bottom layer of the cemetery was established as a mass grave during the time of slavery. And this is hard to hear and it's hard for me to say, but it's the truth. DMV, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia became the primary breeding states for slavery. When the transatlantic slave trade ended in 1807, the DMV and many of the plantations became a site where young girls, some as young as 5, were raped in order to begin their reproductive cycle. And then they would take the babies and sell them all over the South. That is the legacy of Bethesda, Maryland, no matter how progressive they want to be. Ultimately, the developers who purchased the land surreptitiously have tried to expand their reach and their control over the land. And the land is worth over $100 million. The entire region was owned by Blacks, but now there's a Whole Foods, there's a mall, and lots of other developed properties. But we want that land back. And the descendant community, BACC and Macedonia Baptist Church, deserve to have this land. So there has been a court case and there was a favorable ruling in the initial court case in October of 2021. The Housing Authority appealed that decision and it is now before the Circuit Court of Maryland, and we are awaiting a decision on the appeal. Sorry, I have parakeets. So I'm here to say that COINTELPRO never ended. This event that's happening in Bethesda, in the context of everything else that is happening, is a way for them to try to erase our existence, erase our contribution, and to pretend as if all of the work that went into building this society was done by people other than African slaves. And so ultimately, our job is to continue this fight, to ask for people to come out to our rallies. We're having a rally on Sunday, tomorrow, at the birthday party of Jamie Raskin, Congressman in this district, who has refused to meet with us regarding the desecration of the cemetery. We're also asking for prayer, we're asking for donations, and we're asking that you call Jamie Raskin's office and the office of the county executive, whose name is Mark Elridge. There's a great deal of collusion and corruption involved in the licensing and the permitting of the construction efforts that have gone into this whole atrocity. And we do consider this to be a war crime. The United States of America has been at war with African people since its inception. And so this, along with the police shootings, along with financial sector redlining, along with other atrocities and forms of violence, is stepping up our fight. But as you said before, you can't kill the revolution. And Chairman Omali, I just want to say that no matter what happens, we are always behind you. We always care about what is happening to you, and we are absolutely standing in solidarity with the movement. Thank you.
Wow. Uhuru, comrade, thank you so much. I just really want to appreciate that that solidarity statement. And as you said, you are not here alone. Also representing UNIA, the I think you said Empower DC and in Cobra,
Yes.
and the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition led by Dr. Marsha Coleman Adebayo. I just want to appreciate that information. Like the digging up of bones, the coffins. I mean, there's really no length that the state will go to, in order to survive. And it's in crisis, but always at the expense of the people, even in death. So I just want to thank you for sharing those struggles of the work on the ground. And like you said, COINTELPRO has not ended. So I want to appreciate both of our comrades for that, for those really profound statements. And like Comrade Julianne just said, if you want to show your support and say that you are, taking a stance against this and that you can be there when we need you, I want to just appreciate those in the chat who have already acknowledged that they have signed the emergency response pledge. I want to appreciate Union del Barrio. I want to appreciate Kitty Riley, Carabo, Mo Tonea, Carpani Burns, Sandy, Paul Caritis, Victoria. And if I'm missing you, I will make sure that I acknowledge you. I want to really appreciate everybody and Elizabeth for making these really profound steps. Go to handsoffuhuru.org and sign the emergency pledge and continue to stand in solidarity. Uhuru. So we are going to move now to our keynote presentation. And I want to acknowledge that as we say, this fight back is led by the African People's Socialist Party. So it is my honor to introduce the leader of the African People's Socialist Party, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who will continue to deepen this analysis on the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Defense Committee, and why this campaign is so important, but also for us to continue to know what we are fighting against, and that this is a colonial attack on the people by and in form of the state. So I want to welcome Chairman to the call and continue to. I see somebody has also, so Victoria, if I believe, has said that she's also signed the emergency pledge and signed the petition. So I just want to salute that. And I see you here, Chairman Uhuru.
Uhuru. First of all, I really want to express my appreciation to you, Comrade Mwezi, not only for having organized the webinar that we're conducting right now, but for the overall leadership that you provided for the Hands Off Uhuru campaign. It's extremely important. I think everybody who has been here up to now and people who have experienced this, the resistance coming from the Hands Off Uhuru movement and committee would recognize that. So I want to thank you. I want to express a profound appreciation to also to Comrade Benjamin, to Comrade Julianne from the Bethesda African Barrio Coalition. I think it's extremely important what we've heard from Sister Julianne, and also it's very important that we are having this discussion, including comrades from Union del Barrio, the Mexican National Liberation Movement, because too often we have a tendency when trying to understand what's happening to us as African people, as seeing it as more or less totally separate from what's happening with Mexicans and Filipinos and other colonized peoples around the world, but it is our contention that the oppression and exploitation of Africans and Mexicans are part and parcel of the same process that gave rise to the existing social system. So it's extremely important. It's something that we've wanted to happen for a very, very long time in terms of the relationship and with Unión de Barrio, which goes for more than 35 years. It's important because the African People's Socialist Party has been involved for a long time, since our founding in 1972, to complete this Black Revolution of the 1960s. That became so problematic to the United States government that they would initiate the thing that we talk about now in terms of COINTELPRO, et cetera. It really contributed to a major crisis that the whole social system was experiencing. And so we were not only fighting to win this struggle against colonialism, but also we had to fight within the United States and Europe, the whole notion that somehow that the conditions of African people were only important as auxiliary forces to supplement or complement or contribute to what they would characterize as the emancipation of workers of the world, some other thing like that. So that was a hard struggle that we've been involved in for a long time, and the party has absolutely been part of a vanguard to challenge that notion, to challenge the absurdity that would presuppose that African people and Mexican people and colonized people did not have a significant unto ourselves, that somehow we were only significant as it relates to how the colonizers benefited or not from our presence and struggle. I think that one of the things that we should really be just up to now, it should be increasingly clear to us that the United States government attacked the African People's Socialist Party, this most recent attack on July 29th of this year. And they use as an excuse for doing that, an explanation, I should say, for doing that, the notion that the work that we do as African people to free our people is being done at the behest and as employees of Russians, some other force. And of course, that line is important for a number of reasons, not the least of them being that it contributes to a notion that somehow African people do not have the intellect or our own interest that would compel us to fight against the fact that that so many of our people are dying early deaths, the infant mortality rates we're contending with, the vast number of African people locked in prisons. What's happened to Africa now, where our people are starving, despite the fact that Africa is the richest continent on earth in terms of natural resources, et cetera. So to say that somehow we needed Russians to tell us, to hire us, to engage in the electoral process is an absurdity. But it's one that goes back for a while. I mean, because if you even look at what was happening during the civil rights movement, when I participated as someone who was organizing African people throughout, particularly Florida, to participate in the electoral process, registering people, providing voter education for people. When you look at the fact that African people the primary forces that actually died, that were killed as a part of a process of trying to register to participate in the elections in this country, and that somehow it would take Russians to have us do this. And when the fact of the matter is, it was Americans who were killing us and saying that we could not participate in elections or something to that effect, that bombing our churches, assassinating leaders, Medgar Evers, just being an outstanding example of that. We were doing this, we were trying to vote. And there's no fundamental difference in what the FBI is charging now about our participating in elections in 2017, as claiming that it's at the behest of the Russians, than what the white people were saying in Alabama and Mississippi when they were killing us and lynching us and brutalizing us because we were trying to register and vote. This is, people should remember, what we're talking about is 1964, this incredible Mississippi Summer Project, where African people had to go up against the Democratic Party itself. This was the Democratic Party to be recognized as a legitimate forces to represent the state of Mississippi, where we as Africans were using the legitimate and legal process to participate, at the same time where the lynch mob Democratic Party of Mississippi was killing us and doing everything they could to make sure we couldn't vote. And yet, despite all of that, we couldn't get the Democratic Party to recognize us as African people when we attended that convention in 1964, Democratic Party National Convention that happened in New Jersey. So we didn't need Russians to tell us that we wanted to vote. We've always had to fight for the right to vote, and we had to fight against Americans. And even today, as we have in this discussion, it is no secret that there are hundreds of pieces of legislation afloat right now that are designed to undermine the ability of African people to vote. Even the 1965 Voting Rights Act is being challenged and undermined every day. So the notion that somehow to struggle around the ability to vote, to put forth a campaign in the electoral arena is done by the Russians is something that the Russians have pushed us to do, is an extraordinary ridiculous claim, and it's a slanderous claim also, because it presupposes that African people do not have agency of our own, that we do not have the ability to recognize what our needs and aspirations are as a people, that we suffer, that we are oppressed, etc. And this is something that obviously feeds the narcissism, the national reactionary national narcissism of the North American colonial population and the colonizers around the world, because they've done the same thing. I've seen Macron, the president of France, speaking in Africa, facing the wrath of African people, telling France to get the hell out of Africa, claiming Macron, that it's the Russians who had Africans to say, France, get out of Africa, and that the Africans didn't on our own have the ability to recognize that France has bled us, exploited us for the longest period of time. So, this is the ridiculous charge that we are contending with. I want to say that it's important that we recognize that the COINTELPRO, I want to just say a couple of things about that, because I heard mention William C. Sullivan. William C. Sullivan, by the way, is the guy who developed, he was an FBI force who at one time headed up the FBI's intelligence component. And he was the one who developed the COINTEL program, the counterintelligence program, and that killed Malcolm ultimately, that killed so many people, Fred Hampton. Sullivan is the one who developed this program, this counterintelligence program in particular. And he ran into some problems with J. Edgar Hoover, who was the executive director of this secret political police organization called the FBI. And while he carried out all kinds of horrible offenses against African people at Hoover's direction, and as I said, he constructed himself. And you should look up this guy, William C. Sullivan. He's the one who developed the COINTELPRO. And it's really interesting because he has some disagreements with Hoover in terms of how this program was happening in some ways. And so he had made a statement to this reporter This wasn't exactly a reporter, but he was a really important media guy. He made this statement to them that, and let me find that quickly, because I think it's kind of important to understand that what he said. In addition to disagreeing with Sullivan, especially around the money that was being spent investigating the Communist Party USA, he sent Hoover a long letter pointing out their differences and suggested that Hoover should consider resigning. So anyway, Hoover kicked him out of the FBI at that time, moved him from that place where he was located. And then he made this statement, that is to say, Sullivan, after he had to leave the organization, Sullivan told this guy who's supposed to be a journalist, Robert Novak, that someday you will read that I have been killed in an accident, but don't believe it. I've been murdered. And Sullivan was the one who was over the investigation of the murder of Martin Luther King. He developed various kinds of attacks on the African Revolution, etc. So I think it's important to know about Sullivan. And shortly before Sullivan was himself supposed to appear before an incredibly important congressional committee on assassinations, investigating assassinations by FBI, CIA, and these forces. He himself was killed. And it's really interesting how he was killed because, let me see, it says that on November 9th, 1977, days before he was to testify before the House Select Committee on Assassinations, 20 minutes before sunrise, 65-year-old Sullivan was walking through the woods near his retirement home in Sugar Hill, New Hampshire, on the way to meet hunting companions. Another hunter, Robert Daniels Jr., a 22-year-old son of a state policeman, using a telescopic sight on a .30 caliber rifle, said he mistook Sullivan for a deer, shot him in the neck, and killed him instantly. So this was Sullivan, and this is how he died when he was supposed to be appearing before a committee looking at assassinations, after he had declared his disunity with how this counterintelligence program was being articulated throughout, particularly throughout the United States. And so I wanted to say that just about Sullivan. I also want to let you know that Sullivan was later, after this debacle with this FBI, was sent by Richard Milhous Nixon, who was president. And in 1972, he was sent to Nixon to the Vietnam area. He was to initiate a so-called war against drugs. And so he ended up, and by now the counterintelligence program is affecting much of the world. The United States has engaged in real serious war in Vietnam, and part of this whole process of war was to utilize colonized people to kill colonized people. Some of you are probably aware that in Vietnam, especially during the time when France was leader of the oppression and exploitation of people in Vietnam, 71% of all of the French troops who were trying to fight to keep Vietnam living under colonial domination of France were colonized people themselves. And in the United States, from 50 to 66% of the people who were on the front lines in the war against Vietnam after the United States took over that war were Africans in the United States. And that doesn't include all of the other people, the Mexicans and other colonized people who were used to fight against the Vietnamese people. So this ploy of using the colonized to kill the colonized is something that's been going on for a long time. And those examples of the United States and France using colonized people to do that is just one thing. So as the struggle of the people heated up, and the people in Vietnam were winning victory after victory, and the United States government decided that there was this drug problem, and that it was centered in this area of Vietnam, and the so-called Golden Triangle, where the majority at that time of the world's opium seems to have been coming from. And Sullivan was sent there by Nixon, and he was to initiate this campaign against drugs. And what Sullivan did, he created an organization ultimately called ODALE. And ODALE, I think, is an acronym for Office of Drug Administration. It was a look at it. It's Office of Drug Abuse Law Enforcement. That, and the acronym is ODALE, O-D-A-L-E. And so he created this. And then this Office of Drug Abuse Law Enforcement is what morphed into the DEA. I think it's the Drug Enforcement Administration. I think it's really important to understand that, and because this helps us to understand how drugs then began to be pumped into African communities throughout this country, and it was being done by forces like Sullivan, who had initiated this war against African people through the counterintelligence program. Who had he is the one who sent the tapes to Martin Luther King's wife that were designed to try and break that relationship up. These were tapes that allegedly showed that King was involved with other women. He's the one who tried to force King to commit suicide. So this is Sullivan. And I'm saying all of this happens within the context of a counterintelligence program, as we might characterize counterinsurgency, to bust up the revolutionary project that was happening within the United States and around the world. So the fact is, we say that you can't kill the revolution. And we can say you can't kill the revolution because the fact is that the entire social system, and this is extremely important, it's a point that I think is extraordinarily important that we understand, that we are talking about a social system. And in a social system, all of the economic activity within that social system is more or less predetermined in terms of its general activity, how it will function, what it will do. It has various kinds of characteristics. And Europe was living under when we came to know Europe and Europeans, they were living under feudal mode of production. It is a mode of production. It has various characteristics. And the characteristics of a feudal mode of production is that the majority of the people lived, and this is in Europe that we're talking about now. The majority of the people lived as peasants and serfs on land that was owned by landlords and the nobility. And this is a feudal mode of production. And so that majority of what the serfs, the peasants produced, they didn't keep it. It went to the landlords. It went to the nobility. It's what kept the castles running. It's what made the kings magnificent. Queen Elizabeth and her crew, they were living high off the hog based on the fact that peasants and the serfs in this colonial mode of production weren't getting anything, very little. And in some instances, they were starving, literally starving in various places. And by just 1328, things were so bad in England in particular that some of the people in England were so poor that they were not only eating the dogs and cats, but they're sometimes eating their children. So this is a dire situation that Europe faced, that what we now call Europe, that white people that lived under during a feudal mode of production, and they were tied to the land, and they couldn't leave the land. They had to stay on that land, even though they were not slaves, as we've come to understand slavery. And so this was a thing that was starving Europeans. And the way Europe moved from that was Portugal
you know, like in something like 1415, began this attack on Africa. It began this process of setting up what would become the first agriculture industry in the world. They began sugar production and creating slave castles on the West African coast. Began this process of capturing Africans and then forcibly transferring Africans from various places on Africa throughout the world. And in this process, what happened was a new economy was born. And this new economy is what is responsible for overthrowing feudalism. And it's important to say this because what we get taught all the time, this pablum, that somehow some great writers wrote stuff about freedom and democracy. And this is the basis for the rise of what was characterized as bourgeois democracy and the overthrow of the nobility, the overthrow of the kings and the queens and things like that, and the move toward capitalism that the Marxists and many other people refer to as progressive in terms of human history. But the fact of the matter is, it was the transformation that happened in Europe came about as a consequence of what the Europeans, what Portugal, and what others were taken from Africa, and all these resources now that they are accumulating, selling Black people, getting gold and resources from what is now referred to as the Americas. They were becoming richer, wealthier than the nobility itself. So the kings and queens did not have as much resources as these persons were bringing in. And this is the basis of them having to overturn the nobility because they could not progress. That is to say, these rich people who would become the bourgeoisie, the capitalists, could not progress sufficiently under the feudal mode of production. In order to move forward, they had to overthrow the feudal mode of production. And they also had to create democratic capacity for the people who lived on this land, for peasants and serfs to leave the land and to be able to go out and sell the value of their labor power, to be able to go to the cities and to be able to build ships so there can be more ships that they could send African people off to ignite the development of a clothing industry, because they had to clothe the people who were going to make these voyages. They had to the smelting of iron and making chains and other kinds of things, and then building houses. So you have the emergence now of this working class and what they would call progress in Europe in a struggle against feudalism, but it's come at the expense of colonialism. This is the process that put Africa and African people, locked us into this death grip that we are dealing with today. This is why we say that you can't kill the revolution, because as long as we are living under this kind of colonial oppression, we will continue to struggle. Everybody will continue to struggle. And so some of the worst horrendous acts that we know in terms of human history have been created to maintain the colonial mode of production or to initiate this colonial mode of production. And I think as we look at what's happening in Bethesda with the grave there and the complete, absolute disregard for our people, the humiliation that comes along with this. This is part of the struggle that we are dealing with. So nothing that we've heard, what they've done to the people, the indigenous people who they call Indians who live in these concentration camps, euphemistically referred to as Indian reservations, all of this that we're looking at is a consequence of the emergence of a whole new mode of production that replaced feudalism and that connected, for the first time in human history, the world was connected together in a single global economy, which gave rise to an absolute need for a global state apparatus that can dominate and control the peoples around the world. And you begin to see these kinds of institutions emerging with treaties. Most of the time, these were treaties that were organized by these people who we now refer to as Europe to stifle or undermine the fights that they were having with each other over who was going to get what parts of Africa, what parts of Asia, and various other places around the world. So this is what we're looking at, a whole mode of production that has no choice. It has to kill Black people. It has to oppress indigenous people. It has to keep the land of the Mexican indigenous people. It has to do what it's doing in Nicaragua and Venezuela and all these other places in order to survive. Because it is the colonial mode of production is a parasitic mode of production. It requires an ongoing process of sucking the life and the blood of the people. And here you have then, for the first time, there was no Europe when this happened. There was no Europe. Europe was born out of this process of colonial slavery. Europe was born out of this process of taking the land of the indigenous people throughout the Americas. There was no Europe. There was no white man. The white man was given birth by this process. Prior to colonial slavery, the people who we now know as European or the white man identified themselves primarily and defined themselves primarily in relationship to each other. Because we were looking at a land where there were just these warring bands of tribes who were constantly at war with each other over resources where they were located. And so you had the Normans, and you had the Celts, and you had the various other European these other tribes in this land space. And then what happened, of course, with slavery and the advent of the resources coming from slavery that began to change their lives, change the world, you have now the emergence of a situation where these people no longer identify and define themselves primarily in relationship to each other, but primarily in relationship to us. This is the birth of the white man. This is where you see a common consciousness emerging among Europeans, the colonizer, a mode of production. Along with this process of production, there is a superstructure. That is to say, the laws, the ideas, even culture and things like that, that's based on this economic base. And the economic base was colonial slavery. You don't have to, nobody had to go and teach white people to be what we call racist. It was born of a superstructure where the resources of the indigenous people, the resources of the Africans were the conditions for the existence and success of the colonizer. Was no Europe before then. So what you have is a European consciousness that has of itself, a self-consciousness that emerges from slavery. So to try to simply win this struggle by convincing people that slavery is bad and saying nigger is bad and things like that, it doesn't work like that. The fact is that to deny this relationship is almost to deny their existence, their significance, and which is one of the reasons the party has moved the way we've moved in such a long period of time. And I'm saying all of this, brothers and sisters and comrades, because what we look at when we see what the FBI does, we're looking at a representative of the state. What the CIA does, it's the state. When we say the state, I think it's really important for us to reinforce this understanding that the state is this bureaucracy, this entity that has as its command, military forces, the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the CIA, the FBI, the jails, the prisons, the court system. This is one aspect. And then there's the soft state that we're talking about, the educational systems and things like that. This is the state apparatus that has come into existence to maintain the colonial mode of production. And it treats Africans a certain way, and it treats Mexicans a certain way, and it treats these people who we've come to know as white people a certain way in order to maintain this relationship of theft and theft and parasitism that defines what the system is all about. So that's what it is that we are looking at, and that's why when we say, well, the COINTELPRO is still here, well, what is still here for sure is the state, is the colonial state for sure. No matter what it calls itself, the colonial state is here, and it's to maintain the colonial mode of production, no matter what it calls itself. And so it targets me, and it targets Malcolm X, and it targets the Black Panther Party, and it targeted Marcus Garvey, but it also targeted people like Aretha Franklin. And despite, what we're saying in terms of leading into this discussion, it's not just because Aretha Franklin was sympathetic to the struggle of Black people, because she made some donations, volunteered to pay Angela Davis' bond when she was arrested, but because she had influence over African people. because African people liked her. And any independent force that's of African out here in the world is a threat and is under suspicion. And so whether they're part of the revolution, Sam Cooke liked Malcolm X. He was a kind of a follower of Malcolm X, but he was also somebody who was beloved by African people around the world. And so this was the thing that made him a target counterinsurgency, because they could not trust African people who had that kind of influence among Africans to be independent of the control of a colonial power ourselves. And so, and they were always threats as far as they were concerned. In Gladys Knight, all of them threats because of their capacity, should they desire to do so, to win African people to a stance in opposition to our colonial domination. So I think that's part of what is really important to say. And when we say that, and we recognize that the United States government has indicted a Russian, and then said that there are 4 of us associated with the African People's Social Party and the Uhuru movement who are unindicted co-conspirators. What we should understand, just based on this recognition of this relationship we have, is that we are all unindicted co-conspirators. Sam Cooke was an unindicted co-conspirator, and all of the rest of us, because all of us have the capacity to rock in the boat. You're looking at a social system that rests upon a foundation of the colonial oppression and exploitation of Africans, Mexicans, and the various other peoples around the world. When you look at what's happening, despite the explanations they give for what they're doing in places like Venezuela, what they're doing in places like Palestine, what they're doing in places around the world to maintain the status quo, what they're doing in Haiti, what you're looking at is a social system that's defending itself, that's trying to maintain the status of European colonial domination of the world. It ain't because they're white, it's because they are colonizers. And the fact is that the colonizer requires the ability to suck the blood and resources of the colonizer, and you have a colonial mode of production. And for the first time in history, certainly since the Haitian Revolution, the colonial mode of production is experiencing an existential crisis. It's happening inside the United States, where even groups of colonizers, white people themselves, are fighting among themselves because the parasite is losing control of the host. The host is struggling around the world. And so white people are fighting among themselves about who's going to get what. The whole question of democracy is up for grabs. They're throwing off all of that. Black people are being denied the right to vote, challenged the right to vote. And every day you look up, you see greater oppression happening against us and against the colonized people here around the world. And also they have the struggle internationally. Of course, they've had to struggle internationally all along. They've had to deal with Nicaragua. They've had to deal with Cuba. They've had to deal with Venezuela. But now, since the collapse of the Soviet Union in Russia, this is the first time they've had to look at this external force. When I say external, I mean internationally, because Russia, China, this is China and Russia. This is not Afghanistan. This is not Cuba. This is not Venezuela. These are forces who have atomic weapons and the capacity to deliver them any place they want to deliver them. And so they are not intimidated by the U.S. atomic weapons, and they will move to forward their own interests, even if it comes at the interest of the United States. This is a part of the crisis that this system is looking at now. And of course, the ongoing struggle of African people is fundamental to that. And we saw it coming when they first advanced the whole concept of Black identity extremists, because African people represent the Achilles heel of the social system in terms of how it continues to exist, or whether it can exist on this landmass that we call the United States. So we say hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. And we cannot accept just the thing of only fighting this only in the courts, because the laws are laws that were created for the purpose of maintaining the status quo. And the problem that they have that we must take advantage of is that at the same time this whole social system came into being, what they call bourgeois democracy, the thing that gave it democracy and so-called democratic rights that allows it to preen around the world talking about democracy this and democracy that, is what they've stolen from Africa and from the rest of us. And so it's the resources that's come from Africa, that come from the Americas, that come from every place else, that has allowed them on the one hand to be democratic. And so you have the system on the one hand, and they brag about democracy on the one hand, but on the other hand, they kill all these people in Vietnam. On the other hand, they're killing all these people right now in Afghanistan, starving people in Afghanistan. On the other hand, you can't even get clean water in Atlanta, in Jackson, Mississippi. On the other hand, they're doing all of these horrible things that prevents birth from African people, etc. So they have this contradiction. And this is a contradiction that has arisen based off the philosophy of bourgeois democracy. Despite the fact that this philosophy does not represent the actual material reality that we experience in the world. And so they want to be able to say bourgeois democracy, and what we have to do is build this campaign, build it on the issues of democratic rights, democracy, and what have you, and then have them have to solve this problem of what they're doing to the African People's Socialist Party, what they're doing to African people, what they are doing to other colonized people within the United States around the world. That's their problem. Let's put that problem in their lap. You are such a democracy. How the hell can you get away with this? And we are defining our reality for ourselves. And that's why we're able to say, hands off Uhuru. And why we're able to say also, you can't kill the revolution, because as long as people are oppressed, we're going to fight. And the fact of the matter is that progress in human history is that progress that's taken us toward the end to colonial domination and the suffering of the masses of the people of the world. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Wow. 2468, tell the people who we hate. The FBI, the CIA,
the whole damn state.
Yes, Uhuru, Chairman. I just really want to appreciate that powerful presentation, just continuing to deepen the understanding of this social system. And a couple of things that you said, Chairman, about just the economic and political activity, you know, and how it functions to keep the social system alive. And I think it's so important, because the social system is colonialism. And as you have coined, you know, and have come to the development of the colonial mode of production. And this is why we were attacked, because the African People's Socialist Party has its own political and economic activity, and it is anti-colonial. And I just really want to salute that presentation, and you're continuing to deepen just the ideas. And, you know, no matter what it's called, it's the state. It's the state, it's the state, it's the colonial state. So, and as you said, we are all unindicted co-conspirators when you resist. So Uhuru, Chairman, and just thank you for that profound presentation. And I just want to remind everybody to continue to like and to share. If you have not shared, please share today's presentation, our webinar. We are still here. We want you to share, put that in the chat. Let us know you've shared. And if you sign the emergency response pledge or the petition, continue to get others to help us meet our goal. So we will have a Q&A portion shortly, where everybody can ask questions. And we're going to move right into our appeal. We just want to really appreciate everybody for coming on. And one of the things that I want to say is to also take time to really thank everybody that makes this campaign what it is. So I want to go ahead and just appreciate and acknowledge all of our supporters throughout this campaign, those who have supported us prior to this webinar, and continuing, like hardworking individuals and organizations who are playing a really essential role in helping us meet our goals, because we do have goals of this campaign, and you're going to learn about what those are. So this is a mass campaign, and it really relies on the power of the people to wage this fight back. So I just want to acknowledge our supporters of this campaign as well. So next slide. And when you donate to and you support the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Defense Campaign, you are taking a stand in solidarity, right, with the political and economic power, you know, and understanding that this is what came under attack. So when you fund, when you support this campaign, you are saying hands off of what you see in this picture here, the Black Power Blueprint, the One Africa, One Nation Marketplace, hands off of the Women's Health Center, hands off the African Doula Program, the Uhuru House, hands off all of the anti-colonial activity of the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement, which is fighting for African people, the African working class worldwide. Next slide. We also want to take time to thank our endorsers, and to thank all the individuals and the organizations who have endorsed this campaign. So you just heard from two of them earlier, Comrades Benjamin and Comrade Julianne Robertson, and there are so many more, and which you can find on our website. If you go to handsoffuhuru.org, you can click endorsements tab, and there you can read some of the endorsement statements. And if you haven't endorsed or your organization has not, you can do that when you sign the petition at handsoffuhuru.org/petition. So next slide. Just really want to appreciate the stance of solidarity, Uhuru. All right, so, and again, really on behalf of this campaign, I, as the chair, just want to continue to thank our volunteers who have created images, made announcements, helped to really expose this campaign, shared on social media. I want to, continue to give a shout out to everybody who has done what they can to help expose this work. As you can see here, we've had stencils made from volunteers, really dynamic work highlighting all of our events and our flyers. And as you can see here, the one on the image on the right made it to the front page of the November Burning Spear newspaper. This was a sketch by Jay Jutt on Instagram. So we just want to, again, appreciate our volunteers and salute to the creativity of the masses. Next slide. So we are embarking or coming off of and continuing to embark on a tour that will continue to take the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign everywhere it needs to go, every democratic space, anybody, anywhere where we can take this campaign, we will do it, and we will continue to deepen the understanding. So we want to just acknowledge, again, everybody who has helped build the tour from Oakland all the way to St. Louis. As you can see here, this was some of images from our tour in September and October. Next slide. Uhuru, and also our event, well, we made it to the White House and we marched on the White House on November 5th. And, but also in addition to that, you also had a, well, before I get to that, I will say that in November, we've also had some other events that happened after that. And we have also, some of these webinars and information taking place in other languages. Currently, we've had French and English webinars taking place with our International Organizing Committee. And I have some pictures here of comrades in San Diego and LA who came and did a really powerful stand of solidarity event on November 19th saying hands off. And you have members here from Union, from Anakbayan, and comrades from BAP, Sister Gloria Verdu. Next slide. And we want to acknowledge the media. This is a war of ideas, and the media itself is a form of the state. We have to continue to wage a strong fight back in the war of ideas. And so we want to appreciate everybody who has continued to highlight this campaign through press conferences, through interviews to help us wage this counteroffensive. Thank you so much, Uhuru. Next slide. And again, continuing to thank, as you see here in some of the images, and on the right, Mabali Makasi, the Tampa Bay Breakfast Club, the Black is Back Coalition, the Democracy Now! Piece, which continues to get views, as well as the Kansas City Defenders and all these other organizations who have done just gone out of their way to continue to help us have a space to be able to wage this this fight back and this war of ideas. Next slide. And we want to also continue to thank, as you can see here, Sabby Sabs and Marsha Coleman Adebayo, Kat Brooks, the Uhuru House, who has the Uhuru House, well, not the Uhuru House, the Uhuru Furniture in Philly, who hosted an evening with Chairman Omali Yeshitela as well, to help us continue to take this campaign where it needs to go. Next slide. Uhuru. Oh, okay. And again, we want to appreciate our comrades who hosted some really powerful events in Newark, in New York, New York and New York and East New York. We want to appreciate the People's Forum and the Harlem Anti-War Coalition at home and abroad. We want to appreciate Sister Lisa Davis and the Refall, as well as councilpersons Charles and Inez Barron out of East New York for giving us a phenomenal tour of the work being done there. Uhuru. Next slide. And lastly, we also want to continue to appreciate everybody who came out to the events in Minneapolis, at the Unitarian Church in St. Louis, and the March for Reparations in St. Louis as well. And also Sheila Hakamana from WBAI, who continues to, sometimes we can't catch up with how much our supporters are continuing to replay and to talk about what happened on July 29th. So thank you so much. We want to ask you on next slide to keep sharing, continue to share these pieces. If you hold a meeting, send these videos, show it, and then have a discussion around what needs to be done in response to these campaign or in response to these FBI attacks. Next slide. And again, we took it to November 5th on this tour, and we were in Johannesburg, we were in London at the US embassies, and we were at Washington, D.C., marching on the White House. And we just want to salute everybody who made it out, everybody who helped people make it there, everybody who shared. It was a powerful, powerful march, and we will continue to take this fight back. As we said, you came to our house, we're going to your house. So I just want to really salute the November 5th mobilization in Washington, D.C. Next slide. So we have a goal, and this is an important goal that everybody needs to understand, that as we say, this is a fight back, but it's going to take real resources in order to wage this fight back. And we have an overall goal of raising $500,000 for this campaign to cover the any legal expenses and costs, and also the on-the-ground organizing that will be required for this fight back. But in year one, we have a goal of raising $250,000, and we want to just put that out there because it's important for us to know that we can meet this benchmark. But we don't want to be doing this, and I say this every time because I don't want to be here years from now trying to raise this. I know we can do this, and we want to get there fast. So on our next slide, you're going to see, though, what our goal is for today. As we contribute toward this $250,000, we have a goal here in this webinar to raise $1,000. Oh, I think my thing is froze, but next slide, comrade. Thank you so much. To raise $1,000 for tonight's event for everybody who's participating, whether you're online, whether you are, here with us on Zoom, or you're on social media. We want to encourage you to help put out that information so that people understand that when we say hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa, part of this is that we also say hands off the people's ability to take a principled stance in the fight back. So you can donate, and we'll talk about where you can donate on our next slide. Many ways that you can donate, but there is the most easiest way to donate is to go to handsoffuhuru.org/donate. And we ask that we want to be able to thank everybody who is donating online here, on this call. So if you can, please go to handsoffuhuru.org/donate, put in your donation. And I want to thank already Jesse Neville, who has made a donation. So thank you so much, Jesse, for your donation towards the Hands Off Uhuru. And I like to start by saying, because you can hear me talk this whole time. You just heard the chairman, you just heard from our solidarity statements. You heard about all the work that's being done in the campaign and where we want to go. And, do we have anybody out there, right, who wants to help even raise half of this? 2 people, right? 4 people who want to raise this in quarters. And I'm not going to try to do any math, but I want to say that, we have the ability for us to be able to raise these resources over time, but also here today, because as we said, we do not want to, we have to build a really strong legal defense, because there were these allegations. But as the U.S. has taken, all these files and these archives, they are building a case. And it is important for us to understand that waging this fight back in the courtroom is going to cost money. So we need the money, we need the lawyers, we need the support. So I want to just say that. And we're going to continue to tell you other ways that you can donate and that you can support the campaign. But please go to handsoffuhuru.org/donate and or share that link with anybody who who says, how can I support? And no level of contribution is too little or too small. And I want to thank Penny Hess, who has put in a $30 donation. So we are at at this point, we have just raised in just the start of this appeal $50, and that gives us $950 to go towards our goal. So I want to thank you, those who have donated. And if you have made a pledge, make your pledge a reality so I can thank you here on this call. Uhuru. So we like to break it down. Do we have 4 people who can donate? Well, better yet, 10 people, right? Who can donate? What are we now? Like 9 people who can donate $100 to help us meet our goal for today. Perfect. Thank you, comrade. So I want to appreciate everybody who has donated, and I want to ask you to continue to donate, because I want to tell you how else you can support the campaign on our next slide. Thank you, comrade. All right, so what you can do, you've heard us say this, you can sign the petition, you can donate, you can join the committee, you can bring a speaker to your community. So we're going to talk about what that looks like. Next slide. And when we say donate, we want to also say that you can fundraise. We want to appreciate everybody who has done fundraisers so far. You can build an event and raise resources. You can do a house event, a benefit show, poetry reading, like an auction. We've seen some very creative things from the masses. So I just want to appreciate everybody, bake sales, who are helping to wage this fight back. Next slide. When you sign the petition, you are expressing your unity, right? Through, for the ability for African people to advocate, organize, and for the total liberation, and to demand an end to all U.S. and government and colonial state harassments and surveillance, infiltration, threats against criminal charges. Go to sign the petition at handsoffuhuru.org/petition. This is a very open public way to show that you openly support, so that when the U.S. FBI state sees that, okay, we have a goal of raising, even today, getting up to 400 signatures, which I know we can do based on everybody that is watching right now. But we want them to see that the people are not backing down, but the people are taking a stance, and that we're not retreating, we are building. And I want to also thank everybody who has signed the petition thus far and who continues to sign the petition. Next slide. When we say that you can bring a speaker to your community, what this means is that if you have a college campus, if you have an organization, a library, a school, get in touch with our events committee. You can email us at events@handsoffuhuru.org if you're interested in doing that, or if you want to be able to help organize an event, or put us in touch with somebody, please email us at that handsoffuhuru. Or email us at events@handsoffuhuru.org. Sorry, comrades. All right, next slide. And the fourth thing that you can do is that you can, oh, yes, there we go. We have it up. Perfect. So we have a tour that is building. And when we talk about these events, we want everybody to know that the Hands Off campaign is building our tour. So you just saw our fall tour, and throughout the past few months, and in the spring, we are going to continue to deepen this fight back. We want to be on community college campuses. We want to be everywhere that you need us to be, so that we can push and forward this fight back. So email the events committee so that we can get in touch with you to help us build our 2023 tour, Uhuru. Thank you, comrade. Next slide. All right, yes, join the committee. So another thing you can do is to join the committee, and you can do this by emailing us at info@handsoffuhuru.org, or you can go straight to the website, handsoffuhuru.org, and click the volunteer tab. You can be a part of the many committees that we have. You can do social media, you can write, you can help with the legal defense support committee. You can help build tours, you can build fundraisers, and you can, even unite with passing out flyers. And we have some flyers coming out for those who have in the past united with that. And we want to appreciate you, because that is taking a really important stance as well. So I do also want to say that on the next slide, what I had said before, you can sign the rapid response. If you have done this throughout this webinar, I want to continue to appreciate you for taking that stance, to helping us build the formidable response that will be needed if the U.S. government lays any attacks on the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement, or its leaders. And lastly, you can also follow us on, close to last, on social media. These are other ways where you can follow the campaign. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And on the next slide, you can take even just a screenshot of this is how you can join, or this is how you can contact the campaign. You can email us, you can call, and you can also visit the website. So I just want to thank and appreciate everybody, and I want to acknowledge some other donations that have come through. We have Wendy with the $25 donation. Thank you so much, Wendy, for your donation. We want to appreciate Virginia Wilson for a $10 donation. Thank you. We are at 110 raised. We are 10% or just over 10% towards our goal. I want to appreciate Lisa for a $25 donation, and also Sandy for another $25 donation. We will make sure to keep coming back and to letting you and to let the people know how much we've raised. But right now we are at, with another 25 donation from Matsamela, we are at 160 towards our goal. And we have some pledges that have been made in the chat. We have over $100 in pledges that have been made on our various platforms. We want to ask and encourage you. We want to be able to appreciate you right now for your donation. So please make that pledge a reality. Go to Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa, or Hands Off Uhuru. Don't go there. handsoffuhuru.org/donate and make your donation today. So again, I just want to appreciate everybody, and we're going to move our program because there is more, and we want to be able to open up for questions and for answers. So help us meet those goals. But I'm going to turn it over now to Director Akile, who is going to lead us through our Q&A. And again, appreciate everybody for your support. And hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Comrade Chair Mwezi, and for the Q&A, it is going to be just a brief Q&A. We have one question so far, but if you want to raise a question to any of our panelists, please do so in the chat, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, so that we can make sure your question is addressed before this section is closed. So this first question that we got wasn't directed to anyone specifically, so it is open. And I'll prompt all of the panelists to, turn on your cameras and your mics. But this is coming from Comrade Norman Jalali Richmond in Canada. And it's a kind of a long question, but he asks, do you see any singers, dancers, players of instruments, and athletes helping to move our struggle forward? Can you talk about Kyrie Irving and Kanye West, Craig Hodges, the basketball player, and Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, also a basketball giant from Gulfport, Mississippi, who lost big money for standing against colonial capitalism? He also says Jaheim McMilkin was a 15-year-old youth who was just assassinated by the state. Can you discuss this? So that's Comrade Norman Jalali's question that he's posing. And Comrade Chairman, do you want to take this, or let's see? Oh, I see also Comrade Dr. Julianne. Uhuru.
I do want to comment on the Kanye West and Kyrie Irving issue, because as quiet as it kept, we have been talking about it in so many ways throughout this discussion. The colonial question is just such a powerful issue, and the colonial mode of production is something we really must understand. And I know that I continue to say this, and I will continue to say it, because it's once we get that, other things kind of fall into place. And we should investigate what is meant by mode of production, because colonialism can be and has been a policy at particular times, and it may have even begun as a policy early on by Portugal, something like that, but it has morphed into a mode of production where the entire world now functions within that global economy, which is the colonial mode of production. And so the question is, what does that have to do with Kanye and Kyrie? Well, the fact is that once we recognize where the social system originates, of the enslavement of African people, the genocide against masses of peoples all around the world, indigenous population here, I think I read something like about 1619, something like 50 million indigenous people throughout the Americas had been killed by colonizers, and that doesn't even count the numbers of Africans, the scores of millions of African people on the continent being brought from the continent and dispersed around the world et cetera, who died in this process. So that's a critical question. It's a profoundly important ideological question, because and what we have now is the situation where what white people have done to other white people now becomes the greatest crime in human history, and that's what they call the Holocaust. And I want to remind people that there was no such word as genocide until the 1940s, and that was to describe what white people had done to white people in Europe. And so, and not only was that described, in fact, for the longest period of time, and it's almost true today, that it was almost like there was a copyright on the term genocide. You couldn't even use it. We and the party had an instance where we were fighting to get our children who were being kidnapped and given to these mercenary white people, had 900-1,000 bed spaces to take Black babies and things like that, and we characterized it as genocide. And I'll never forget being criticized by a woman county commissioner in California for even using the term genocide as badly as the Jews have been treated. So it's this whole Holocaust question is an ideological weapon, an ideological tool that's absolutely necessary to maintain cover for what has happened to us and what has happened to indigenous people. It continues to happen every day now. I mean, Leopold killed at least 11-12 million Africans in Congo alone. And so, and this is what gave birth to this system right now. And so, and I just want to say that as Kanye did not put anybody in ovens, neither did Kyrie, and you don't even have to agree with Kanye's politic to be able to say that. It's true. But they've used this Holocaust thing as the means by which they can punish and brutalize anybody who does not toe the line, and they need it. They need the Holocaust thing to cover the crimes that's been committed against Africans and other colonized peoples around the world. So I think it's important to say that, and if they were serious about providing a homeland legitimately for Jewish people, then I could really unite with them, giving Frankfurt or Berlin, Germany, to the Jews for a national homeland. But the Palestinians had nothing to do with putting Jews in ovens, nothing to do with the Holocaust. Farrakhan had nothing to do with the Holocaust. And Kanye West had nothing to do with that. So it's a cover. And it's absolutely important for African people to become poster children for the genocide that was committed against Jewish people. And that continues to obscure, undermine the legitimacy of our recognition that of what is happening to us as a people. And we live in cities. I lived in St. Petersburg, Florida, where there's a Holocaust museum. The city supports it. There's one, I think, in St. Louis. If not, they're building it, supported by the government as well as other entities. No Jews were put in ovens in St. Petersburg, Florida. But I tell you who were lynched in St. Petersburg, Florida. I can tell you who were killed in St. Louis and throughout Missouri. So I just wanted to be able to say that. I know I've sort of talked about it a long time, but I think it's really important. In terms of artists, the artist that you mentioned, Comrade Norman Jalali, I think is, when you talk about Kanye and you talk about Kyrie, you also talking about what would prohibit many of these so-called artists to make contributions to the struggle of our people who feed them and their children. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you so much. And thank you, Comrade Norman Jalali Richmond, for that question. And I think that, it's a really important question. It's something that is like on the headlines of, every like tabloid and social media post is this, discussion around these individuals, particularly Kyrie Irving and Kanye West. And this is just a really important, as you said, we have to understand this question of the colonial mode of production to even make sense of it. And, just the absurdity of placing Africans as the face of this whole concept of anti-Semitism, when the fact is that this colonial mode of production is, wreaking havoc on colonized people everywhere, all the time, incessant violence, and and the colonizers are not even acknowledging this, and Palestinians, as we have this discussion, are being bombed and killed. So I just really want to appreciate, Chairman, you putting that into the proper perspective. I see Comrade Dr. Julianne, your hand is raised, and I want to make sure. Uhuru.
Uhuru. I wanted to just follow up. I can't follow Chairman, but I'll try. Ultimately, the campaign in the media to expose Kanye West as a agent of the ruling class is intended to create a schism in the Black community. Our objective is to bring conscious awareness to our collective plight. But when you have a Black man on camera saying things that reflect a kind of dysfunction, then people who follow him and like his music want desperately to believe that what he says comes out of some creative genius, when in fact he may just be a very sick person. So they're using him as a diversion from police shootings. They're using him as a diversion against manipulation of the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas and his wife should have been in jail. And I said it, I'm a lawyer, and maybe I'm not supposed to say these things, but I'm gonna say it. He should have been in jail. There's no way in the world that he's not guilty as he could be of planning, assisting the insurrection, and creating the conditions for those cases coming out of the insurrection to be glossed over and not prosecuted properly. So we're seeing at the same time of a disintegration of the American system and a hard move into totalitarianism. They're making those political moves. They're taking away what little freedom people may have. And they're using Kanye West as the poster child for not being able to speak what you think, not being able to say what you want to say. And even Kyrie Irving got in trouble because Kanye got in trouble. And so I think that part of our objective is to agitate and organize against the kind of disinformation that we saw. And it was also a big power move on the part of the owner of the team that Kyrie Irving plays for. So I just feel as if we're moving into a higher state of activity in our movement, and we have to find ways to ignore people who are speaking utterly ridiculous things.
Let me just build on that, because I think it's really important, everything that's being said. And so they're stripping Kanye West's money, taking money from Kanye West because he's said something bad about Jews. They say, or favorable to fascism or Nazism or something to that effect. But they ain't taking no money from Kanye West because of what he said about George Floyd. They're not taking any money from Kanye West because he said white lives matter. None of those things. It's not just that Kanye West will say something that is diversionary. It's something that Kanye West functions as a means by which, again, he can become, the African people can become the poster children for oppression and exploitation of somebody. And also it obscures the historical contradiction that the whole world is confronted with. And the historical contradiction the whole world is confronted with is not what happened to Jews in Germany. It's what happened to Africa, African people, all of the Americas, the whole world. And as I said, there was no such word called genocide until what happened in the 1940s, until the 1940s, when Lipski, the Polish Jew, succeeded in getting this adopted by the United Nations. And even after that, the United States refused to ratify for 40 years. And the reason it wouldn't ratify the Genocide Convention was because they were concerned that Africans and indigenous people living in this country might take them before the United Nations and charge them with that. So, so I agree with the comment, Sister Julianne, in terms of her observations around this. Is absolutely true. Uhuru.
Uhuru, absolutely, Chairman. I remember what you said at Black is Back, that nobody pays a price for what they do to African people.
No.
And, including, Kanye's, own backwards statements about Africans, but that's just a normal consequence. If you're a colonized subject, then your conditions, are just supposed to be normal. I just, we have to wrap up this section, but there's this white man, Jerry Jones, who is in the media now. He's the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, this NFL football team. And his picture was found of him, at part of the front lines when I think it was at the time when Africans were being, integrated into these white schools, and these white children would brutalize African children. He was there, and there is no uproar, no loss of any of this stuff, none of this stuff for, again, this history and the present day attacks against Africans. Nobody pays a price, but we have to. That's what we're here for. Just really want to appreciate this discussion, and again to Comrade Jalali for raising the question, because it is very important. So Comrade Mwezi, we are, I think, at time for the discussion, but I just want to thank all of our panelists for all of your presentations today.
Uhuru, Comrade, yes, and we look forward to continuing to have these discussions. So if you have questions and you put them in, our chat moderators we do keep track of these, and that we can continue to raise these questions in the future. And I just really want to salute and just really appreciate this really profound webinar, one of the many that we will do, but we continue to deepen, the understanding of what we are fighting up against. So I do want to give a quick update on our donations, and also ask people, or just remind people, to continue to support. So we have raised a total of a total of 235, and I want to also appreciate Cara for your $20 donation, and Paul for your Cara for your 50, and Paul for your 25. And I want to also acknowledge some of our donors who are sustainers, who continue to give on a monthly basis. One of them who also made that donation today. So thank you so much for all of our supporters. Thank you for everybody who has tuned in. I want to appreciate those who I didn't name, Kat and the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition, for also signing the emergency pledge. And on our next slide, we're going to just give you a quick reminder to help build the 2023 Hands Off Uhuru Tour. So through Uhuru Tours Speakers Bureau, one of the institutions of the African People's Socialist Party is supporting and sponsoring, is promoting the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa 2023 tour. So email us at events@handsoffuhuru.org so we can get that going, and we can get the chairman and our unindicted four and other leaders of the movement who were under attack out there and in the mix. So I just want to again appreciate everyone, and I'm going to turn it back over to Chairman for some closing remarks for today's webinar. Uhuru, Chairman.
Thank you, Comrade Mwezi. I know I acknowledge some of the people who are participating in this process, and I do want to give a special shout out to the comrades in Southern and West Africa in particular, because I know that there are groups of them watching together and under difficult circumstances, because, just in terms of sometimes not having access to electricity and the infrastructure that permits for the social media access. So I want to just express a real appreciation to your brothers and sisters. And I'm doing this in part because what should have come through this discussion is that the colonial state is everywhere. And one of the most serious expressions of the colonial state as a global entity is neo-colonialism. And we're facing neo-colonialism all over Africa, where it is the colonial state, this European state power that has imposed these phony leaders on us that assassinates people like Sankara, that assassinate people like Lumumba, overthrowing Nkrumah, et cetera, and put these puppets in place to maintain the colonial mode of production. So I just wanted to say that. And finally, I wanted to also let people know that you should get this extraordinary issue of the Brenningsville newspaper. It is from December 2022, and the headline celebrating 54 years in print. So you should access that. And just want to say, everybody, that it's been a great webinar, and I appreciate it. Comrade Sister Mwezi, thank you so much. And Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Hands Off Africa.